Coming up, Google Gemini gets a big upgrade and more cuts at the UK's RNIB charity.
You're listening to Double Time, your daily accessible technology show. Now, here's your hosts, Stephen Scott and Shaun Preece.
Hey, Shaun Preece, how you doing today?
I am great, thank you, Stephen Scott. The sun is shining, it's a beautiful, beautiful day, and there's more tech news. What more do I want?
Absolutely. You know, it is a strange paradox. Quack, quack.
Oh?
Because, well, you know, paradox.
Sorry?
That's my thing. Anyway, it is a strange paradox at the moment because we've got, you know, this amazing tech news. Google Gemini has now launched Vision. Of course, Vision's been available on the website for a while. You could get it through the AI Studio. Now they're releasing it to Android phones, in particular the Pixel 9 and the Samsung S25, which I've got one of. So demo coming soon. Well, I will say, so a slight issue.
Yes. Go on, confess
I
yourself.
got up early this morning. I got up really early this morning with my intention of doing a little demo showing you how Google Gemini works because I'm really keen to play with it.
Yes.
And, well, in particular, the Vision feature, right? So the idea is that it's kind of, well, I don't know, but I mean, the idea is you can ask it about things in front of you. So look and tell on your phone type thing, right? So I thought, oh, that sounds cool. I'll try it. Now, when I set up the Samsung S25, I thought I'd be a little bit smart because it had a couple of different options. It had face unlock, it had fingerprint, it had, what do you call it?
Pin or pattern.
Or pattern. And I thought, you know, I haven't tried pattern before. That'll be cool. I'll do pattern because, you know, I mean, it's a very simple thing. It was very accessible, very easy to do. And I thought, well, as long as I don't forget the pattern, we'll be fine. Zoom forward to this morning, and I seem to have forgotten the pattern. I can't remember what it is. I've tried. I thought it. Do you know what I thought it was? I can tell you because I'll have to change it now anyway. I thought it was a house because it's like 9 dots, right? And you just sort of draw, and it will tell you as each dot is tapped or pressed, or you know, you swipe over it, it will tell you which one is added. And so essentially, you're kind of drawing
Dot to dotting.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, basically. And so I thought I'd drawn a house.
Yes.
And it kept saying no. Now, the problem is it doesn't give you an option to do anything else once you've incorrectly entered your pattern so many times. I guess it will eventually come up and say, right, you're clearly an idiot. We need to reset this phone. But I wish it would do it quicker because I was hoping to get the Google Gemini feature. I just want to get it play. So, yeah, basically, I'll have to reset the phone now.
Stephen Scott can't draw a house. Breaking
can't-
news.
Can't draw a house if even the house was the pattern in the first place. I think it was. Anyway.
Pin code.
Yeah, but like I say, I mean, some cool stuff going on, and some of the demos that I was watching last night, some very brief demos that were shown by Google themselves. And you know, this is interesting because on the phone, when you're using the Gemini Vision feature, it isn't just what's through your camera; it's also what's on your phone screen. So as you're navigating through an app, you might come across, let's say, an image that isn't described, and you want to know what it is. You can just ask Gemini, "Okay, what's this?" And it will tell you, and it'll give you information about it. And in that conversational
gorgeous.
way. That sounds really interesting. Now, then, of course, you have the video aspect as well. And what I'm keen to try is, what does that mean? Because, look, we did try Gemini Live Vision. You tried it, didn't you? On your phone, I think?
That's right. I tried it as a mobility aid, yes, when it was first released through the website. And, you know, just like all the others, when it comes to live video, you've got to prompt it every 2 seconds for mobility purposes. It's not really there yet, but I will say it was great for looking through your wardrobe and saying, hey, what's this t-shirt? Hey, what color is this? What's that? It's like having someone by your side.
That's
so that
what I'm
case,
interested in. I think that's
fantastic.
Yeah, that's the bit that I'm interested in. There was a great demo, actually, a very simple demo. There was a guy who had lost the lid. Sounds like something I would do. He lost the lid for his coffee machine, and he wanted to buy a new lid. So what he wanted to know was, does the lid I found on Amazon match the coffee maker I've got?
Ooh, would you trust it? Okay.
Well, this is the interesting thing, right? So this is, again, the combination of it seeing what you're holding, or, you know, the device in front of you, and also its ability to get vision through your phone, so actually see what's on your screen. So what I asked him to do was asked him to show, I kind of guided him in a way to say, right, I need to see the serial number of the coffee machine you have. So can you hold up and so he's kind of just holding up the device and holding up the thing in front of the camera, And eventually it can see the serial number and it scans in on it and says, okay, so the serial number is this, and I've matched that with the website. And yes, this lid is compatible with your product.
That is nice.
That's
nice.
That's it, isn't it? These are the jigsaw pieces starting to come together.
Yeah, very cool. I think I've got a recollection of someone cooking using this, you know? Using the live video aspect to, is this browned enough? And, now add this and how much is in there. And that, I seem to remember, worked pretty well as well. So, again, potential. I'm excited.
I mean, it's all, they're doing the other stuff as well, walking around like an aquarium, asking, what's this shark and what is that shark? And, tell me more about it.
Big shark.
Yeah, exactly.
Little
it's a
shark.
big one.
Baby shark.
This one will eat you. This one will not eat you because it's a baby. But it will bite your finger. That kind of thing, which is cool. I think for kids this is going to be great, but, stuff that. I want to play with these toys.
Well, if you could remember how to draw a house, Stephen Scott, you could be right now. We could be talking about it, except you forgot and you're a terrible tech person.
I am honestly hopeless. Honestly.
TTP.
Terrible at my job. But look, as I say, it is a bit of a paradox today because, we've got a really good, thank you. We've got a really good tech story, and then we have another story which is kind of sad in a way, because we're talking about further cuts at RNIB, that's the Royal National Institute of Blind People in the UK. And these cuts are going to have a direct impact on Braille readers. Now, we know, of course, that RNIB is facing, as many organisations around the world are facing, a huge funding challenge at the moment. And they're trying to navigate this and find the best way to continue to deliver the services that are most valuable to, I guess, the most amount of people that they serve. Well, here's one that is sadly fallen under the axe. RNIB has recently made its change to its personal transcription service. It's a service that once offered blind people a limited amount of free transcription into accessible formats such as Braille, audio, or large print. Now, apparently without any warning or consultation, the Braille part of that offer has been withdrawn. For many, especially those who rely on Braille and live on low incomes, this decision will, of course, have been met with much anger, and we've certainly seen that on social media already. For some, they're going further. They're saying it's a direct threat to literacy and even independence. Well, according to sources within the organisation, the transcription service has been outsourced to a private company, and while the organisation plans to subsidise this cost, it's not clear how long that will happen, leaving blind people to pay for Braille materials that were once made freely available, materials that some will simply just not be able to afford. Now, while the RNIB cites cost and a desire to reach more people with different services, critics are arguing that this move disproportionately impacts those with the most significant vision loss and undermines the very mission of the organisation. We do have a statement from RNIB, which we are going to play in after this interview. Joining us now, though, is Connor Scott-Gardner, a blind writer and disability rights advocate who has launched a petition calling on the RNIB to reverse this decision. Connor, great to have you here with us on Double Tap today.
Yeah, thank you for inviting me to be here today.
So perhaps you could explain to us what the personal transcription service was and how it helped you and others in the community.
Yeah, absolutely. So the personal transcription service was an RNIB provided service where you could call them, drop them an email, write to them if you wanted to, and basically say, I've got a document or a short book or whatever it was that you had that you needed access to in a format of your choosing. So that could be maybe you had a favorite book that you used to read, you've lost your sight, you can't access it anymore, it doesn't exist anywhere else, you need a copy of it. It could be that someone in your family is getting married and you want a copy of the kind of information you get at the wedding and all that sort of thing. Anything you really needed, personal letters, whatever it was, you could say to them, I really need this. It was particularly helpful for musicians who often find that pieces they need to perform with choirs, orchestras, etc. aren't available already transcribed into Braille music. And so they would contact the service and say, I've got this piece of music. Can you please transcribe it for me? And so you would get a amount of free transcription a year. And that amount has kind of varied depending on the project and also their workload. So if you came to them and said, I've got this massive book that I need transcribing, they might say, okay, we'll do it, but it's going to take a while versus a shorter letter. So there was always that understanding, but it gave you crucially Braille, large print, audio, and tactile diagrams. We shouldn't forget about that transcription for free.
And when did you first hear about this change? And how was the information shared with blind people, if at all?
Well, the information has not yet, unless it's been shared within the last hour or so, been shared publicly with the community. And yet the change has come into force. So it's not that we've all somehow found out before it's taken place. I found out because the parent of a blind child posted on a blindness-related Facebook group to say that she had asked them to transcribe a book for her daughter, which is something she's done before. And they said, oh, well, we don't do this service anymore. We are going to send you all to a private for-profit company, and there is a limited RNIB subsidy, which we don't know if that's limited in quantity or limited in time. That's been unclear. I think time limited based on some other communications I've seen. During this transition period, after that, you'll have to pay full price effectively. And so this happened last week. And I saw it and I thought, well, how strange. I've used the transcription service before. I used it, for the first time, it must have been I couldn't even tell you, but probably about 14, 15 years ago that I first used the service. So a long time ago. And I've used it on and off ever since. And I was quite surprised. I thought, well, I haven't heard anything about this. Admittedly, I haven't sent anything to them within the last year or so. So I thought, well, maybe I'm just out of the loop. And I reached out to friends of mine who I thought would maybe know more than I did and said, have you heard about this? And they said, no, but we're doing some digging. So this was happening Friday night. So Saturday morning, I rang the helpline because I thought, you know what, there's no point in speculating. I'm unhappy if this is true, but I need to get the correct information. I don't want to go into this and start shouting at them for something where I've got the wrong end of the stick. Yeah. So I phoned the helpline and the helpline advisor was really, really nice and said to me, look, I've only just received the information too. They said, I haven't even had a chance to look at it because it was sent to me yesterday. So clearly customers were being told before even helpline employees, because if this parent had known before them because she contacted the RNIB, the helpline weren't even told at that point. And they said, yes, that the service is being scrapped. So it all happened very quickly with no organized communication to the community and crucially no consultation with service users either.
Yeah, and that will, I guess, have led to the backlash that we've seen online and, of course, the number of people signing your petition as well. We're going to talk more about that in a minute. But I want to ask you about this because the cost of Braille transcription is quite expensive. Can you maybe explain to us a little bit how costly that can be? And why this matters so much? Yeah,
Braille transcription is expensive. I think the misunderstanding that people have is it's not like print. So let's say if you've got a document on your computer, or let's say I've got a document and I need to give it to a sighted person, I can, as long as that document's reasonably well formatted, hit print, link up my printer, great, excellent. Braille is very different. The formatting rules of Braille are slightly different to print. You need to ensure that the Braille code is correct, that there are different Braille codes and different Braille signs depending on what language you're using. If you've got a sort of mixed media document where maybe you've got some in one language, some in another, or some mathematical content, some literary content, this really makes it even more complicated. So you need to get manual transcription. There is an element of electronic transcription that can be done, and you can have a very roughly formatted Braille document produced. But even the cost of the actual device, we don't say print Braille, we say emboss Braille. A Braille emboss is going to set you back around £3,000, and that's at the lower end of the spectrum. You think most people are paying like £60 for a printer, and it may not be the best printer in the world, but it's going to print. You're not going to get a Braille embosser really for anything, certainly nothing under £1,000. And what you'd get in the 1,000 to 3,000 is quite limited. You're looking at 3 if you want an embosser that can really handle the kind of documents most people will be using. And then a box of Braille paper, tractor-fed Braille paper, 1,000 sheets, that's going to be £50 to £60. So all of these costs add up. And the RNIB model was previously that they would take on some corporate transcription. You think your banks, your utility companies, government departments who would pay, and that money, in theory, this was our understanding as a community, should subsidize then the personal transcription costs. So that actually, maybe they can't. That's why there was always a limit. You couldn't send in 20 books and say, well, I want these by next week. Not going to happen.
Yeah, you had to
Quite
be reasonable.
So
Yeah.
100%. And one person can't hog every resource for the whole community, right?
Yeah.
And that's why there was always a page limit of some variety. Whereas now it's gone to, you've got to pay privately. The argument I've seen from Matt Stringer, CEO of RNIB, in an internal briefing was that, well, alternative provision exists. Alternative provision are these private companies that no blind person really can afford, or very few, apart from those in a quite, fortunate position. Most can't. Meanwhile, the RNIB is campaigning and saying, oh, the government are proposing cuts to disability benefits. This is terrible given the number of disabled people living in poverty. And then they're talking about the extra costs we face, and ironically, giving us even more extra costs.
Now, your petition mentions that large print remains free. What message do you think that sends to those of us who are totally blind and rely on Braille?
What I think that says is that the RNIB is prioritizing a certain type of blind person, and that is generally older people who experience vision loss in later life, who maybe need some things enlarged, and I'm not saying young people can't need large print. Obviously, we know that's the case, but I think the demographic they're reaching for are the older community who have lost their sight. Those people absolutely need to be supported. It is crucial that anyone experiencing any sight loss at any age receives support. I don't think any of us would argue otherwise. What it does say, though, is it tends to be congenitally blind people who learn Braille because we learn it through the education system, or those who lose their sight earlier on in life. And that's partly because those who lose their sight later on often can't access Braille teaching, even if they want to learn it, there's not the resources available. What it's saying is that the RNIB values one group more than the other, and that actually we're just not that important to them. And the justification even given in a communication I saw between a customer and the RNIB, a very unhappy musician who wrote to the RNIB saying, well, what am I going to do about my Braille music? The response they received was, well, large print is the majority. And it was phrased like that they are the majority of transcription requests, and so they've been prioritized.
I mean, you could say it's a bit of a numbers game because, RNIB has said,
Sure.
at least in the documentation that's been read by you on the petition and information that we've got from you and heard from others, that the service only supported around 500 people a year. What's your response to that figure? I mean, is it fair, considering RNIB has huge budget issues at the moment and a huge financial constraint on itself, and is, of course, trying to reduce its spending? Is this in any way justified? Can it be justified?
I don't think so. And the reason I think not is because blindness itself is a low incidence disability. When you're comparing it to other disabilities, there are fewer blind people than other groups. Certainly, as you go down the age brackets, the younger you get, the lower the incidence disability becomes. Within that, totally blind people, or those with what I guess could be deemed the most significant levels of vision loss, are an even smaller group. Most people with vision loss overall have quite a lot of remaining vision, and we just know that as fact. But objectively, it is harder to get access to materials in Braille than it is in those other formats like large print or audio, because you really do need specialist transcription. You should have specialist transcription for large print, because large print users are all unique in terms of some people want 24 font, some people 36, different font families, all these kinds of things, right? So there does
one
need
size
to be,
doesn't fit all there either.
100%. So there does need to be transcription, but if you are totally blind and you're a musician, there are very few ways. And I pick on music in particular because I think it's a really good way of illustrating why this service is so necessary, though for many of others as well. There really aren't any ways of accessing it without Braille, and you cannot just feed a piece of sheet music in, you can't just link up a Braille display, have your sheet music on your computer screen. It won't read it. You cannot do it that way. And so there is no other way. And so I said, this is absolutely vital. And we also need to consider, okay, why are only, let's say, 500 people accessing it a year? Is it because of the amount of time it's taking to get things transcribed? Because this service has been chronically underfunded for years, and so waiting times have got longer and longer. And so are people just going, well, I just won't join this choir, well, I just won't join this theatre group then, but if I can't get my scripts in Braille, I just won't enjoy this activity, I'll just sort of remain isolated. I think that's been part of it for sure. And I think ultimately, if we're going to look at numbers, well, if the RNIB wants to support the majority are sighted people. Inherently, the RNIB has always existed to support a minority, and they need to do that, because who else is going to?
Do you feel there's been a shift at RNIB in terms of priorities? Do you think that the organisation is less focused on the totally blind community versus the low vision community? Is that an issue for you?
To a degree, and I really don't want to play us versus them. I don't want to be like, we're really, we have no services, low vision people have a great deal, because I don't think actually that's the case. I think that what I would say, though, is that the RNIB over, I think, the last 15 years has really moved further and further away from providing actual services. They've said, oh, well, we don't want to be a service provision organisation. We're going to, do our campaigns, do whatever instead.
And they have said that. They have said that publicly, haven't they?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I think it was Peter White who interviewed Matt Stringer on In Touch. And Matt Stringer even said, we're not a service provider. But then my question is, why not? Because actually, it's services, objectively, I think, that we need. How are you going to get your Braille? How are you going to get your, I don't know, if you're a QTVI supporting blind students and you need to purchase accessible resources, where are you going to get those from, if not the RNIB? Where are you going to, access expertise in Braille transcription or magnification, all these different things? If they're not providing services, the question, what are they doing? And actually, this argument that, blind people can just be fully integrated in society and not need services, the integration of blind people relies on those services supporting us. Without those, we will slowly become more and more isolated. I think we're really going to see that.
If RNIB are listening to this, and I imagine they will be, what would you want? Let's say that the CEO, Matt Stringer, is listening to this right now. What would you want to say to him?
I just think he needs to understand the breadth of the community and not view it as, okay, the majority of blind people are over the age of 60 and have lost their sight. They're the only ones who we should be prioritizing. They absolutely deserve support. Objectively, that is the morally right thing to do, is to support them. It is also the morally right thing to support people who have gone blind, who were either born blind or went blind in early childhood, and who maybe rely on slightly different services, who don't necessarily need peer support groups and that sort of thing, but who need these sort of tangible services from an organisation like the RNIB that are not, despite his insistence, being provided elsewhere. I just really want him to come and actually meet with some of us and have a conversation. I don't want this to be, we don't like senior leadership. I don't think that's productive. What I do think is that there's been a serious lack of consultation of the whole community. And they also need to look at, okay, when they're consulting the community, if you're only consulting within your kind of community groups, automatically probably blind people who are quite busy, have full-time jobs, maybe aren't in those groups, but actually they're maybe the people who need services like the transcription and who really rely on those. So I think there needs to be a real understanding that actually our voices need to be integral to this, that you cannot serve the community without hearing from the community.
Connor, tell us about the petition. What are you asking for and how can people support the campaign?
I'm asking for the RNIB to, at least for the moment, reinstate the personal transcription service and to conduct a full evaluation into it, and that would mean a consultation with service users. So I've said in this that we are calling on them to reverse this decision. And whilst I would like that reversal to be permanent, I think they need to look at, okay, where, if it's not going to be permanent, can it be given over to another non-profit organization who can take on the infrastructure and still do it at a nominal charge, if not free? I think that's what needs to happen, rather than going, we're going to move it to a private company. People can support the campaign by visiting saveourbraille.wordpress.com. You can sign the petition there. You can also find some resources. I've uploaded a page where if you want to email the RNIB, I give you some pointers. These aren't things to say. They're things like, think about what Braille transcription means to you. I'm just giving people kind of an idea of if you're faced with a blank email and think, what do I say? Just some things to think about to help you word it in the way that is meaningful to you. Sharing the campaign on social media is really helpful. I will be uploading some images that people can use. I need to put those together. Obviously, as a blind person, that takes me slightly longer to do that. It's not as easy for me to throw together. So it's taken a couple of days for me to get those. But I will be uploading some graphics, including alt text that you can use if you want to post on visual platforms like Instagram. I've advised people to call the helpline if they prefer to sending an email. And if anyone has a story to share, that's really powerful and important. And we need to hear from people who use this service and who are currently feeling really lost and who are worried about it, because I think it's through stories that we can help people to understand why this matters.
And we can do it respectfully. We can have a respectful argument and a respectful discussion about this, but it is important that these leaders listen to this and come and talk to us. I think that's the key, right? They've got to talk more about what is going on. The challenges that are faced by RNIB are huge. And I think we can all understand that. We can recognize that. We also know that RNIB has had to cut back on a lot of jobs. Lots of good people have lost their jobs. Yeah. And it's a tough time for many people. And it's a tough time for the people working in there, I imagine, because they're facing all these cuts and changes that are coming to services they probably do not want to see change.
No.
I mean, just here's a random question, but, if you were in charge, what would you cut at RNIB? How would you balance the books?
I think that's difficult because I cannot claim to know the full scope of every single thing that RNIB does. I think there are lots and lots of services, particularly on the kind of business side of things, working with businesses that we don't see necessarily as consumers. So I don't know that I could give a fair answer. What I think I would seriously need to look at is actually where are services being provided elsewhere? For example, with kind of community calls and things, actually, what is the demographic that joins that cause? And if it is predominantly older people, are there actually calls by an organization like Age UK that broadly do the same thing, right? So I'd be asking those questions, and I don't have the answer because I don't know the demographics. And it could be that actually on a lot of these community calls, it's younger people, right? In which case, maybe there isn't an alternative provision. So I think I don't have an answer because I don't have all the information. And I think it's unfair of me to say, well, I know everything. I don't.
But I think you bring up an interesting point, though, about collaboration, because I think that this is the year we're seeing that in terms of technology. We're seeing a lot of companies come together because they realize that the market they are trying to chase is the same market. And this is something which actually RNIB went down this road many years ago. When I was there, they tried to do this before, and it was kind of by a lot of resistance at the time, I remember. The idea of RNIBs of steamrolling in and taking over all the local charities. If we remember the Action for Blind People situation back in the day, and there were a lot of people unhappy with that, and I understand that. But equally, if everyone's chasing the same coin, how does anyone win? I guess is my question. And this is ultimately it, isn't it? Collaboration is key. And what you're saying is perhaps more with non-profit than for-profit companies. That's what I'm getting from what you're saying.
Yeah, and I think for-profit isn't inherently bad, where a subsidy, a long-term subsidy, not a very vague in the short term. I mean, what does short-term mean? Short-term could mean 3 years or it could mean 2 months, really. In the terms of businesses and organizations, short-term is a relative term. And so I don't think that helps to say. I think that is as well, I think what frustrates me about this decision is seemingly overnight a choice was made with no sort of transition period and no clear boundaries. How long is this subsidy in place for? How much is the subsidy? Is it let's say, a £30 subsidy for every single transcription, irrespective of the cost, or is it 50% of the cost of the transcription? We don't even seem to know that. There's been no communication from them, and that is what is angering people, because people then feel like decisions are being made without any involvement from the community, but also without even having the decency to inform people properly. It should not have been that a parent rang up to get a book and was told, oh no, we don't do that anymore, and that's how everyone found out. Like, that should not have been the communication. It should have been, in a month's time, this is what will be changing, this is what we are doing, and even that would have upset a lot of people, but at least we could say actually that there's at least been the most basic level of respect shown to the community.
Yeah, it seems like the lack of communication is the big issue here. Now, your petition has already gathered a lot of signatures already, including mine.
Yes.
For full transparency, I've added mine to it as well, because I do agree that this is a necessary thing. We need to have this. We need to have access to it. I've told my story on air many times about, my recent experience with Braille and how I've sort of joined the Braille bandwagon to say, which maybe a few years ago I wouldn't have done because I wasn't using Braille. Now I am, and I see the value in it. So I'm totally with you on this. But it has had the petition, perhaps unsurprisingly, has had a lot of signatures. Any contact from RNIB to you directly at this stage?
No, not yet. I have to say I'm not particularly surprised by that. I think it will happen potentially at some point. I don't know if it will happen. Obviously, they ultimately have the right to never speak to me if they don't want to. That is, at the end of the day, their prerogative, right? They can make that choice. I am happy to engage in meaningful, respectful dialogue with them. I am equally happy to engage in more radical protest action if it ever becomes necessary, And this is the thing I've said to people, and I spoke on another podcast yesterday. I said, I don't want to march down to London particularly. I am quite honestly quite busy, like just with my life. And I really, really could do without doing that, as I'm sure we all could. But if we need to do that to reclaim services and to actually say, hang on a minute, we do have a voice, we are strong as a community, I think that there will be a need to do that if it comes to it. And I really just don't want it to. I want this to be resolved really amicably, because it's better for every single one of us, irrespective of, and I don't want to say what side you're on, but if we're going to say that, right, irrespective of what side you're on, resolving it really amicably and politely is just the best way for everybody. It really is.
100%. Remind us where the petition is so we can all go and have a read at what you've written and also decide to sign.
It's saveourbraille.wordpress.com.
Wonderful. Connor, thank you so much for your time. Appreciate it here at Double Tap.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Great to hear from Connor there, Connor Scott-Gardner, who created the petition. And as I said, it has had a lot of signatures already, Shaun. From I note, and I'm not outing names, but I see a lot of current and ex-RNIB employee names on that list, which I find interesting.
Really? Okay.
Yeah, clearly a lot of people who are not happy with this decision. We'll give our 2 cents on this in a minute. First, though, we did reach out to RNIB ahead of the interview with Connor there, and we asked them to respond to Connor's petition. We did ask to speak to someone from RNIB. Instead, we got this statement, and it is read by Laura. And this statement is from Matt Stringer. He is the CEO at RNIB.
Last year, we launched our new strategy, which is designed to inspire and drive even more meaningful change to people with sight loss. In order to deliver on that new strategy, we've taken the time to review our organisation's structure and services with the ambition to reach more people and deliver more impact in a sustainable way. The outcome of this process has been that we're increasing some services and reducing others. One of the difficult decisions we've made is to change what we offer through the personal transcription service. Demand for our bespoke personal transcription service was very low, and production costs were very high. Therefore, we've decided that an external supplier would be much better placed to provide excellent personal transcription services to individuals who need it. After very careful consideration, RNIB will still provide large print on demand. Our other transcription services, which provide Braille books, talking books, Bookshare and much more to thousands of people across the UK will continue as normal. We understand that these changes will be disappointing for people who have enjoyed our personal transcription service over the years. We're committed to ensuring a seamless transition while the changes take place. The new approach to the personal transcription service will offer an improved customer experience where people can email or phone our trusted provider with their specific requirements. Our aim continues to be ensuring RNIB is there for as many of the 2 million blind and partially sighted people in the UK as possible. This change in service will allow us to allocate our resources towards services with broader impact and greater reach.
So that statement from Matt Stringer, CEO of RNIB, and that statement coming into us, as I say, ahead of that interview with Connor. I imagine more questions could go back to RNIB based on just that conversation with Connor alone. Shaun, I want to get your take on all of this. What's your thinking on what you've heard?
Well, firstly, can I say, I thought Connor was absolutely amazing.
Yeah.
I mean, he put his arguments, the reasoning behind it, perfectly reasonable, and he put it so well. Absolutely amazing. And I agree with everything he said. I think there's two major points here. Firstly, how this was handled. I mean, how much of a fumble could that possibly be? To firstly not just contact people beforehand, not to consult people, not to let people know. And then the way that people found out, I mean, let's be honest, that is absolutely ridiculous. We've had so much talk recently about, companies like Glidance and Be My Eyes and others out there that are interacting with us, with the community. And it's all about, listening to what we want and putting out their thoughts on where things should go. This is no different. I don't care the number. 500 people are using it, if that's the correct number. Then reach out to them. Say, hey, look, this resource is under threat. What can we do so this is still available to you? Is there some sort of price point we can reach per item or whatever it may be? Consultation is key. This stinks to me of the very thing we accuse the other mainstream big companies of, well, we don't get many blind people who need this resource, so why would we bother, I'm sorry, that is the whole point of the RNIB, to meet these needs. And secondly, so that's how they interacted with the community. Absolutely terrible. I don't think there's any defense in that. I'm sorry. Secondly, when it comes to the actual resource itself, the transcription service, again, finite resources. I totally understand that. But for me, this does seem like a real core service that should be provided. Access to information is something, as Connor said, everything there. When it comes to music transcription, for example, where else are you going to go? And why isn't that covered? I am slightly the first issue of communication. I have absolutely no sympathy with the RNIB on. The second one, finite resources. What do you do with that? I do see there is an issue, but at the same time, I think they've got a duty to fulfill that, especially when you think about the parents who's trying to get a book transcribed for their child. I mean, what more do you need? It should be there. And doesn't this also push the issue, we've recently had 200 years of Braille, and we keep saying, Braille is important, it's important. And to come out and say, okay, we're going to keep doing large print, but Braille, not many people use it. Aren't we reinforcing that thing that we've been railing against for the longest time when we try and get Braille teaching resources? And the response we get is, well, there's no call for it. So, okay, is that it then? Are we just going to let Braille and tactile diagrams just fade away?
Yeah, I want to echo all that.
Okay.
Because, no, I agree. I cannot disagree with any of that. I think ultimately it's a bad look for RNIB. I think it's a really bad look because this is an organization which is for whatever the tagline is, blind people. The word blind is in the title. And look, I'm with Connor, right? I don't want to start us versus them because actually we create a division that is not of our own making, is not of our own choosing. Essentially the large print continues, the Braille doesn't. I mean, if you were being fair, you would get rid of the whole thing because you would say, well, look, we can't afford the service, rather than saying, well, we can't afford it for these particular people or this particular section. if you can't afford it, you can't afford it, right? So
Yes.
get rid of it. Hive the whole thing off to a private company if need be. That at least would feel a bit more equal in the approach. But the idea of them going out there and saying, well, look, Braille, there's only 500 people. Well, I'm sorry, but that's 500 people that need that service. That's a lot of people, I think.
Yeah.
The RNIB doesn't serve that many people when you think about it. I mean, it can, and it potentially could. But with these finite resources they keep talking about, the very people they do want to serve, they're cutting off. And I don't think that's fair. And I think it is a terrible look for an organization which at the turn of the year went on about Braille at 200. As we did here at Double Tap, and I think we've done our bit here to, really push the cause. In fact, it's so weird, actually. It's such a weird place you and I have ended up in, where we are the defenders of Braille, and we're people who, 10 years ago would have probably been joining in with the chorus to say, okay, Braille's dead, whatever. Because I was one of those people at one time. But it's very different. And this is, again, I've got to say it, this is what happens when you have people who are in an organization who are, and I'm not just putting this on RNIB, any organization, you need to have the people you represent in the organization, and not as advisors, not as volunteers, but paid members of staff. People who you can turn to and say, what do you think about this? Is this a good idea? Because I have to say, I'll put it bluntly, I think if the CEO of RNIB was blind and used Braille every day, this decision would not have been made.
Well, again, though, I
because how could you justify it?
Well,
how could you justify it as someone who's blind, who's using Braille every day?
Yes,
would say, well, I'm sorry, guys, this is a need. This needs to be.
No, of course it is,
there.
right? But this is all very cool, right? And I was on my soapbox there, all very cool. But there is a harsh reality to life organizations and funding, right? And we do keep mentioning finite resources. If there was a case that, hey, we simply can't sustain this anymore, there is going to have to be a cost to this. I don't think that's necessarily, wrong. And how often have we said, we can't expect everything for free all the time? We've said that subscription models. But
the RNIB is not a poor organization. It is not a poor charity. It has got resources, okay? It has got a decent budget. Now, granted, that budget has decreased a lot, and they have to find cuts. But do you think a service that is directly aimed at blind people affecting Braille is the smartest move they could make? I mean, to me, if it's a small, very small part of their operations, why would you aim the fire at that? That's what I don't understand.
How much are you saving by that small amount? Well, there is a
reputational damage might be worse here than the actual change to the actual amount of money they save by what they actually do here.
Yeah, absolutely. But again, I think that's a discussion to be had, and I would actually love, Matt from the CEO of the RNIB or anyone from the RNIB to come on and have a discussion with Connor directly, because I think perfectly reasonable discussion. There's going to be no gotchas here, and everyone's reasonable. I would love that to happen, because whatever the fallout from the actual decision to cut this service, again, the consultation, the communication, I'm sorry, you can't defend that. You can't just say, oh, well, that's gone, and then you ring the customer services and they don't even know about it. How does that happen in this day and age? That is terrible.
Yeah. No, there's no defense of that at all. And there is no defense of that. This was poorly organized and communicated, perhaps deliberately. Perhaps they thought, look, if we sneak this through, well, not sneak it through, but if we push this through, no one will notice. Let's see who notices. Let's not put up
500 people.
Let's put up a new not put up a new episode of Double Tap today, and let's see who notices. That's not a good way to do things, is it?
Yeah.
At the end of these are people who rely on a service, and like Connor has articulated much better than you and I could.
Yes.
There are people who rely on this for lots of reasons. I mean, there's one example. Well, I won't join that choir anymore. I'll just stay at home.
Yeah.
And Connor brings up a really important point. And it's a point I've been kind of coming back to time and time again. This rush to inclusion the ultimate cost is exclusion. actually. And this is the bit that people don't really understand. When people
No, I don't. Explain.
So people say all this all the time. Oh, inclusion is great. I remember when I was at school and we were inclusion was the big thing, right? So we're going to bring you from the specialist education into mainstream education. That's good because then you're just part of everyday society, and the children there learn about you and you learn about them, and you're in a regular classroom and you learn the same way. And personally, I do not feel I got the education that I could have got had I been at a specialist school, because the amount of effort that had to go into accommodating what I needed, because we were dealing in a mainstream environment. So a teacher would turn around and say, okay, today with class, I've decided we're going to do this. And then they would hand out a workbook, and then I'd have someone having to run away and develop this workbook in the background, which meant I didn't take part in that class, which meant I had to wait a day for that to happen.
Well, aren't you putting the argument forward for the removal of the Braille transcription service in that case? No.
What I'm saying is, if you are putting out there the idea that we include, what happens is services then are affected. So, if, in the case of the Braille transcription service, I'm not equating the two, but what I'm saying is, if you're looking at inclusion, right, what you're saying is, okay, so we include everyone. So everyone's in the same bucket now, right? We're all in the same bucket. And we can all just live our lives and we all just get on with it. Because those services can be handled by the mainstream. So the iPhone, for example, the iPhone's a great example of this. So the iPhone, that's it. Everyone can just have an iPhone, and suddenly every blind person's, got all the tools they need. But what if you can't use the iPhone? Or what if you struggle with the iPhone? Or what if a website's inaccessible? Or what if an app's inaccessible? What if all these challenges happen? So therefore you need specialist options to get through your day, to get things done. Like, as great as magnification is, and I hear this a lot from low vision people, as great as magnification is on a smartphone, nothing beats your good old-fashioned desktop magnifier or CCTV, because that's built for the job.
Yes.
And we do need specialist services. We can't just have everything hived off or rely on Braille. And look, if RNIB, and RNIB doesn't do this at the minute, but if it were to offer, say, Braille displays, in the way that, if they could do that with perhaps a deal the way that, American Printing House for the Blind does in the US, and blind people through the National Library Service get access to reading machines, through Braille displays or Daisy players, then that would go some way to helping this, because suddenly you've then got a way of getting access to that Braille. Of course, let's not even think about the training and all the other aspects. But the bottom line is, if you don't have access to the personal transcription service, that means you don't have the access to the Braille material. You don't have a device. That person may not have a device. They can just get a file emailed to them and read it in the way that you can with NLS, and of course, and through APH.
Couple that with the changes to the tech support with the
that's
RNIB.
right.
I mean, what are people left with? So yeah, look, despite the arguments, and again, I do have some sympathy about managing resources for an organisation like the RNIB.
I do
as
too.
We talked about with Angela Bonfanti from the CNIB, CEO of CNIB. Lots of great ideas and the direction to go and the roadmaps and what services need to be done. But again, a finite amount of resources. But every organisation around the world's facing this.
So there's one example that came out from the conversation. Now, there was no suggestion that the Smart Life Centres that CNIB do, the stores, are going to go away. But Angela raised an important point. Okay, look, if we're selling the same stuff that other places are selling, then, we're essentially duplicating. And I think that's the place you want to start. I think if you're looking at an organisation, whether it be RNIB or CNIB or Vision Australia or any organisation you can think of, what are you duplicating? What are you doing that's already being done? Now, there are arguments being made that Braille transcription is available elsewhere, but not on a free national basis. You have to pay for it, right? So, okay, that's an argument. But the point is, if you're saying like for like, well, there isn't a like for like there. You'd have to pay. Now, you can argue whether that's right or wrong, but that's the point, right? The point is that if you're saying like for like, it's not like for like. But the Smart Life Centres, the RNIB has its own shop as well. If there is duplication going on, could you save money by reducing that? Do some Amazon affiliation or something, set up a storefront rather than having a whole store and a whole thing to have to manage. Would that not be smarter? Would that not save money but equally provide a service? You got to think outside the box here, guys, right? That's the whole point. And I know they probably think they are thinking outside the box. But I think getting rid of services that blind people need relating to Braille, it's a bad look. That's my take on it.
Yeah, I agree. Well, that's our 2 cents anyway. We want to hear what you think.
Yeah, look, and I wasn't planning to spend the whole show on this, but we kind of have. But I do feel, I feel this is so vital, because my fear is with this that there are organizations around the world that are also looking to make cuts. Everyone's looking to make cuts, and things are only going to get tougher, right? There's no denial of that. And are they going to look at a decision like this by RNIB, which for many, many organizations around the world is a bit of a leading light? I've spoken to many organizations over the years. I've been to many different countries. People look to the RNIB for direction. And if they start to see RNIB pulling away from Braille, is there a sense out there of, well, hang on a minute, if they're doing it, then perhaps there are less people reading. Perhaps there are less people using it. Now, I know that RNIB
justification,
and I know that RNIB would come back to me and say, well, we're not abandoning Braille. We're not saying Braille is dead. I know you're not doing that, but it's the actions you take.
There is a perception.
There's a perception, and it feeds into, as you said earlier, it feeds into that perception that Braille is dying. There's less need for Braille. There's less people using it. Now, of course, they know the numbers of people using that specific service, but is that because only so many people know about the service? Because I bet there's people today who'll be saying, hang on a minute, RNIB had a free personal transcription service? I didn't know that.
Yeah. And you know what? Invest more into that service. Let's get that turnaround time reduced.
Exactly.
Let's get more items processed. Maybe more people will take advantage of it.
And
we
maybe,
don't know.
And maybe we do. And look, as blind people, we do need to take, as I've said before, we need to take some responsibility here as well. If we can pay, we should pay.
Yes. Yeah.
I think that's fair, right? So if I'm in a position where I want this, there should almost be an option. And I think it should be an option, because I think, on the whole, blind people would be, no one would be taking the mick here. I think a lot of blind people would say, okay, look, I can't afford for this service. I can afford for it. So, or my organization can pay for it or whatever. So I'll pay. And that means that someone else can get it for free.
Yeah.
I'd be well up for that. I'd be well up for that, because then if it meant the service could continue. But again, the problem is lack of communication. And the lack of communication perhaps stems from this traditional view. Well, all blind people have low incomes and can't afford anything, so, we don't want to ask them for money, so therefore.
Mm-hmm.
And we've got to stop that. We've got to stop that, because, Connor is absolutely right. There are many blind people who are in employment, in jobs, they've got a good income coming in, they don't have the time to join all these RNIB meetings and CNIB meetings and webinars and events, because we've got busy lives. We can't do all that all the time. So our views aren't heard. And that's a problem. That's a big issue for us, because we're not heard, and therefore that kind of idea will never surface, because the people who you are talking to are the people who can't afford it, who are in the position where they're saying, well, you can't take this away from us, we need it.
The answer is, of course, consultation, communication, as you just said.
Yeah.
That is, it's as simple as that. It's so basic, and to drop the ball on something like that.
Well, look, it's an open invite.
Great.
It's an open invite to Matt Stringer or anyone, frankly, from RNIB. We've certainly reached out on this occasion. We got the statement that you heard. I don't know what I think of that statement, to be honest. It just felt like it was just affirming what we knew. That's all I really felt from that statement. I didn't feel any sense of remorse about it or the decision. I feel it was a case of, look, we have to make these business decisions, and therefore that's the decision we've come to. They will argue, and they did, that they have engaged another supplier, and how long that will be subsidized for, we don't know. But look, I think I would love to invite Matt Stringer onto the show, and you're right, get Connor on and others as well, and just have an honest conversation. That's what we like to do here at Double Tap. Let's talk.
Yeah, there's no necessarily a villain here.
There's no villain. No, but we're all trying to do the same thing.
It's a problem we're trying to resolve. So I think we just need to talk about it. So absolutely. And again, look, saveourbraille.wordpress.com. Definitely check it out. We're not saying you need to sign the petition. No. Get the information and see what you feel about it.
Yeah. Give us your views as well. If you want to get in touch, of course, you can email us feedback at doubletaponair.com. We do love hearing from you. And we did promise you this week we were going to get into endless feedback. Unfortunately, There's been endless news as well, so we've been trying to balance it up. But I did feel today it was important we discussed this topic because I do get a little bit concerned about where we're going with Braille. And I think it comes back ultimately to, on the wider sense, the lack of data around the use of Braille. There's so many people will jump up and down and say, Braille is needed, Braille is read by everyone, Braille equals literacy, Braille equals employment. And it's just words. They don't have any data behind them. Mm-hmm. And maybe there is a debate to be had. Maybe there's a serious debate that needs to be had about the future of Braille. I mean, if services can't be found, if costs of devices are too high, and the number of people who are not learning or who are learning screen readers is low, and there aren't much options out there for learning screen readers except for basically learning by yourself. Maybe there is a bit of a focus needing a shift of focus needing here. Great debate to be had, and I'm sure we'll definitely have it here on Double Tap. So as usual, your views always welcome. Thank you to Connor for coming on. Thank you to RNIB for sending the statement. And I look forward to hearing what you guys have got to say on it.
It's going to be a hot topic. I can feel it.
Yeah. I just want to get my phone I want to get Google Gemini.
Do you have to go back to
I'm sure it was a house. I'm sure it was a house.
What kind of house? Bungalow? 3-story?
No, it had a nice little roof.
Oh, right. Okay. A child's house. That sort of, square with a triangle on top.
Shaun, I'll catch you tomorrow. I'm off to fix my Samsung phone. Yes. Bye-bye.
Okay. Good luck. Reset. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thanks, folks. Bye-bye.